What's up, hooligans? Welcome to another edition of the Unreasonable Odds podcast. Back in the mix once again. This is probably my monthly appearance, so we'll see you guys probably June 15th after this. So at least if you like me, get used to this appearance because I'm probably gone for like 2 months after this. But happy to be back in the saddle, of course, with my dude, Julian Edlow, giving some instant reaction, 12-hour reaction, 24-hour, depending on when you watch this, to the NFL draft that took place on Thursday. First round went through. Was nothing short of drama. There was plenty of that. There was some surprising moves that were made. We're going to kind of give some of our analysis on some of that. And then later in the show, we have a very special guest that we're going to bring in on, that we'll be bringing on to the show. Chelsa Messenger, host of Picks and Parlays, will be here to talk some MLB betting as well. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Julian, my friend, what's going on, dude?
I love betting the NFL draft. It's so great. And
it's a great rush.
It's a great rush. It's a different kind of sweat than a game. Like you're either glued, you either want it spoiled by Rappaport or Schefter. They're not quite Woj bombs. Like Woj and Shams have them like 5 minutes before the picks in the NBA, and it's totally different.
Yeah.
NFL, you can get them like a minute, 30 seconds before if you want it, or you can just watch the broadcast and get it. It's a different kind of sweat than a game. Betting drafts, obviously, waiting to hear that name. And then it's also just, I did a radio interview asking, for some advice on betting the draft and whatnot. Like it's so much different than betting a game. Like over the weekend, the Jazz were minus 1,000 money line favorites against the Timberwolves, and they lost. When something gets to minus 1,000 in the draft, that's going to happen. Now, maybe you don't have the bankroll to bet things like that, but like if you're not afraid of laying some juice, like I watched Kyle Pitts go from plus money to minus 120 to minus 150 to be the first non-QB selected. I bet him pretty big at minus 150. It was like minus 400, minus 450 by the time we got to draft night. And it was a great bet. So like if you do your research and you aren't afraid to lay some juice, or you want to get in early on things that you think are going to happen at great plus money and just watch them come down, betting drafts are great. This is the third year in a row profitable on the NFL draft. I'm pretty sure I have to go back and check last year, but 2 of the last 3 years, the NFL draft best bets article has been undefeated. Last year I wrote so many, there were going to be some losses in there, but it did very well. So betting drafts, that's I love it.
And I'm glad you brought that up about, getting on something early, because then, the odds shift dramatically. Because one of the big storylines going into, and we started on the DraftKings Sportsbook specifically going into the afternoon, was Trey Lance going 3 overall, the third pick going to the 49ers. We saw some massive movements on that during the afternoon. Obviously, when the 49ers originally drafted up to 3, the idea was that it was going to be Mac Jones. He ended up falling right into the Patriots' lap at 15, and they went instead with Trey Lance. And over on your Twitter account, at Julian Edlow, you posted this beautiful looking graph that showed how the live movement went for who was going to go at 3, because quite frankly, we all knew how the draft was going to play out. Trevor Lawrence was going to go first. Zach Wilson was going to go second. The draft really started at pick 3. They ended up going with Trey Lance, which I felt like was probably the right move because, basing on talent, yes, maybe Justin Fields is probably the guy that should go there. But for what the 49ers wanted to do and their offensive scheme, Trey Lance was the better fit for the 49ers. So as the day went on, Lance was becoming more and more of a favorite to go at 3rd. If you follow that trend, you followed where the money was going, you would have won that bet. Kind of talk us through, your mentality as you were seeing that movement and then how that ended up playing out here on draft night.
Again, these don't always work in drafts, but they usually do. This is not the Patriots moving from minus 6.5 to minus 9.5 and the money's piling on. You still have to play the game and see what the score is. This is a team who knows the 2 teams before its decision. They have their pick of anybody left in the draft. So it's just betting on information. And the information was good. I know you and I were both able to scoop up Trey Lance yesterday at even money. And that worked out great. So I also, when Rappaport put out the report that it was between Mac Jones and Lance, I bet some Lance before Fields. I bet some Lance under 6.5. Just because this whole time I never bought the Mac Jones stuff. Like Mac Jones was, I think the Patriots got Mac Jones right around like his ceiling in the NFL.
Where he should be going.
I thought he could have been a late first round pick. We'll see how that goes with the Patriots. It's obviously a good landing spot. I don't love the prospect, but that's a different story. Yeah, when you start to see that money move, it was a great kept secret by the 49ers. When they traded up, you don't give that much up to move that high up unless you know who you're taking. They knew who they were taking all along. And the cool part of how good they kept this secret in the Twitter era and whatnot, between the time of that trade and the pick being made, Fields was minus 120 or something. Mac Jones was minus like 275, 300. And Trey Lance closed minus 200. All of them, all three quarterbacks that we knew would be on the board there were odds-on favorites at one point in time. So great job by the Niners in this day and age, keeping things, under the vest.
On top of that, too, unless Trey Lance is a good actor, you saw like a genuine reaction come from him about getting the call. And he even said when he was on the stage, I didn't even know until a couple of minutes ago. Like, obviously, some of these guys had a good idea of where they were going. And unless Lance is playing all of us, he genuinely seemed somewhat surprised that he was the guy going to 3.
No, I believe him because the Niners didn't tell anybody. They didn't tell their coaches, their personnel. It was just like Shanahan, Lynch, and I don't know who else that knew. So I don't think they told Trey Lance he was the pick. I think he probably got some good vibes and knew that it was a very realistic possibility. But he doesn't know how their workouts with Mac Jones and Justin Fields went. They could have liked one of him more. Lance was the prospect that made sense. Like I said in my videos for my mock draft, where I was our only analyst that had Trey Lance going number 3, I would like to point out. Here's why it makes sense. Like, the one thing that the Niners said before Shanahan started talking about who knows who's going to be alive on this earth at the end of the weekend, and we like all 5 quarterback prospects. That's why we moved up. Like, he just started spewing garbage because one of the things that he said early on is Jimmy Garoppolo is going to give us the best chance to win next year. We want to use Jimmy Garoppolo and develop a quarterback. When you say that, who's the guy that fits at number 3? Trey Lance, the mystery prospect that is well coached, player's son. He's 20 years old. He's got all the tools, but you probably want to sit him for a year and let him learn. Like, that's the part that added up for me and made Lance the likely pick. And just using your eyes, like Mac Jones is not a top 10 prospect. So it all worked out as advertised. Did really well with the top 5 picks. Wish I acted more on Chase. I just let my head. I know a lot of us, including you, are like, protect Burrow. We kind of learned that pick was going to be Chase, especially by the odds later on. I wish I got in a little bit there. So I'm going to have a day 2 NFL draft, NFL best bets. If you're watching this on Friday before 7 p.m. when things start. This morning, Bengals next pick to be an offensive lineman was like minus 250. It's up to minus 335 for the Bengals in that 5 spot in the second round to select an O lineman. There's a few good ones on the board. So it's going to be that. Like I said, if you don't mind laying juice on something that's going to happen, that is going to happen.
Right. And I agree with that too. And, obviously I wasn't crazy about the Chase pick, not because of the player, but because when you look at the Bengals, like, their need is not at receiver. Like, they still have a good core of receivers, even if they don't take Chase. Like,
yes and no.
Go ahead.
I mean, so I just think it gives them all the pieces of like a really elite offense, except you have to fill the line out even more now. So like, Sewell it sounds like he's a generational lineman. Like, he opted out last year. So his last season was protecting Herbert before the last draft. And it was like, if he gets another year under his belt, he could be a 3, 4, 5 overall pick. It's a tough pass. It's tough to pass on Sewell there, I'll admit. But this is a guy that Burrow knows well and that knows Burrow well. And like, that connection could be big time. Like, we're talking for fantasy DFS purposes down the line the next few years, like, the Burrow Chase stack could be that like Breeze, Michael Thomas, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones type of stack some of these weeks in fantasy. And T. Higgins is a really solid guy opposite outside, and Boyd is a really good slot guy. So like, they're building one of these really elite type of offenses. Now, they just really need to focus on the offensive line through trade, free agency, their next, whatever, make your next 3 picks O-linemen. I don't care. Do what you have to do to protect Burrow now at all costs, because you have those pieces in place. But I think that, there's only one prospect like Chase when you consider the part of how he played with Burrow and has that connection. So if you put a lot of stock in that and feel you can get the lineman later, go for it.
I mean, I also didn't like the pick because I had Chase over 5.5, for his landing spot. So there's that too.
Right.
I want to jump over into the top 10 because right after the top 10, because I think the 2 biggest winners of the first round are right in that realm. The Eagles traded up to spot 10, took Devontae Smith from Alabama, which is going to be huge for him. And Jalen Hurts gives him a nice weapon because the Eagles.
That's another former college connection right there.
Correct. But if there's one thing the Eagles need, there are many, but Jalen Hurts needs weapons. He needs a downfield threat. He did not have that. Like, you look at the Eagles depth chart heading into the draft, it was pathetic. Like, there was nobody that stood out to you. Like, there's Jalen Hurts as number 1 guy. Maybe Smith's not number 1 right off the bat, but he probably is going to be in that conversation. And then right after that, immediately the Bears jumped in, took pick number 11, and they took Justin Fields, who, we just talked about for a long time was, maybe the 3rd pick for the 49ers. The Bears were able to swoop in, get their quarterback of the future. It is not Andy Dalton. It is not Nick Foles. It's Justin Fields. But those are probably the 2 biggest winners from the early portion of the draft for me, because it's 2 teams that had a huge need to fill. They did their part. They traded up where they needed to. And the Eagles kind of bounced around in the draft here, ended up with 10 because we saw a couple moves that they made. But they got their guy. The Bears got their guy. I mean, do you think those are the 2 biggest winners of the first round? Because those are the ones that stick out most to me.
Start with the Bears, who were clearly if they're not the biggest winner, they're top 2 or 3 because they did a great job going up and getting a guy that I think a lot of us, we all had our mock drafts based on what will happen in the draft. But I think a lot of us, just from doing all the shows with the analysts here at DraftKings, most of us had Fields as like the 2nd best quarterback prospect behind Trevor Lawrence. So they're getting a good player. They're getting a tested player who's, played at Ohio State. He's played in big games. He's played against good competition. He's been through adversity. He's played hurt, taking that big crack against Clemson in that game and staying out there and continuing to shred them. He's tough. He fits a team like the Bears with that toughness. I just feel that's going to work out. This isn't Mitch Trubisky, who was kind of that mystery guy at the top of that draft. And looking back at it, how wild is it that people will bite on a mystery like that over prospects like Watson and Mahomes? Trey Lance seems a little more raw, head on his shoulders. Trey Lance seems like he can get a little more polished. I like him a lot more than Trubisky, which is very easy to say, now, but great draft for the Bears. Giving the first round pick to move up 9 spots is well worth it, given what you got. The Bears were obvious. The Eagles, they could have. I wouldn't have hated if they went cornerback early, a huge need. Yeah. But then Horn goes 8, Surtain goes 9. Now there's not an elite corner either. Right. Waddle goes 6. There's only one really premier wide receiver or corner prospect left. So you've got to make sure. And the Giants clearly wanted Devonta Smith at 11, especially considering we know when they made back. That helped the Bears big time, although maybe the Bears could have made a move at 12 or whatever. They clearly wanted Smith, and it's funny that the Cowboys helped the Eagles move up to pass the Giants to get the wide receiver that the Giants were going to take. Is just a funny storyline. I don't know if the Eagles are the biggest winners, but they did a good job getting a position of need. And Smith is a great possession receiver that has some background with Hurts, obviously from Alabama. A lot of that last night. Hurts and Smith get together. Tua and Waddle from Alabama get together in Miami. Obviously, Burrow and Chase get together from LSU. And then the Jags put Travis Etienne and Trevor Lawrence together from Clemson as well. So a lot of teammates quarterbacks getting their passing weapons last night.
And I think it's important too to note that, like, if there was needs for the Eagles, it was definitely cornerback and wide receiver. It wouldn't have made sense for them to take quarterback there, because the next one that went off the board was Caleb Farley from Virginia Tech, and he didn't go until pick 22, I think it was, for the Titans. So unless they were going to move back again in the draft, that was the right move to make, and they did get the right guy for it.
Which, I mean, the Eagles, some teams had Farley just off their boards altogether because he has 2 major back surgeries.
Right.
So Tennessee took a risk on him. So yeah, if there's nobody left at your positions of need but Smith, great move.
Last move I kind of want to hit upon, and this was the one that really everybody was waiting on to see what they would do. The Patriots ended up taking Mac Jones at pick 15. Obviously, Mac Jones was in the green room probably a lot longer than he expected, falling all the way down to 15. He's saying the right things after the draft, secretly wanted to be a Patriot. This is where the landing spot was going to be. There was a lot of chatter about if the Patriots would move up into the top 10 to grab a quarterback if they, if things fell the way that it was. Once Trey Lance went at 3, I think the Patriots felt safe that they could stay put at where they are, and they were going to be able to get the quarterback that they needed, because if it was not Trey Lance, I feel like another team, maybe even the Panthers, might have done their due diligence there and take Trey Lance there, even though they have Sam Darnold. But once Lance went to the 3rd spot, I think the Panthers were content with who they had with Sam Darnold. They did end up picking up his 5th-year option. So there's that too as well. So they are going with Sam Darnold. But I think that Trey Lance pick was so important because it paved the way for the Patriots to be able to land Mac Jones. I think you and I both aren't crazy about the pick. There's one thing I don't like about Mac Jones. He's not, once he gets flushed out of the pocket, not the player that, and look, Cam Newton has not been a viable quarterback, but if there's one thing I do like about Cam Newton is that he's mobile. But the Patriots did what they did in the offseason with so many weapons that they have. They don't really need a mobile quarterback because they have so many guys on the field now that Cam or Mac Jones can throw to. So it was the move that had to be made because, why wouldn't they take Mac Jones at 15, who was, potentially a 3rd pick overall. But, as a player, it is what it is. It was the pick to make, but doesn't mean I have to like it.
I'm just not buying, like, the perception was obviously that Jones was going 3 because he touched minus 300 there. So now everybody thinks the Patriots got the number 3 draft spot at number 15. I'm not sold that was ever anywhere close. 49ers knew the whole time who they were taking. Mac Jones had no shot all along of going in the top 3, which means if no other quarterbacks are going in the top 10, Mac Jones had no chance all along of going in the top 10. This was a mid to late first rounder for me all along. I was shocked when he got the boost that he did to 3. It didn't happen, which makes sense. And, I think the Patriots took him almost a little early. I'm shocked that the Patriots actually spent first round draft capital on a quarterback. Bill Belichick has never done that. He is stubborn. Tom Brady was a 6th round pick, 199. We know he should think that he can get away with that again. Find another Garoppolo, find another Stidham, just keep going until you find your guy late even in this draft. Take somebody tonight, take Friday night, take somebody on Saturday afternoon. I'm shocked, even though it's a Saban connection.
I was going to say, how much did that come into play? Because I feel like if he was in any other place but Alabama, he may not have been that guy.
A lot. Bill Belichick has to have gotten a 100% stamp of approval from Nick Saban that Mac Jones is a legitimate prospect. So maybe I'm not going to sit here and pretend that you and I know football like Bill Belichick and Nick Saban. So they're probably right about this, I would hope. But we don't seem to think Mac Jones is that good of a prospect. And you know me, I'm a huge Alabama guy. I bet them all the time in season. I always bet them to win their conference, bet them to win the SEC, bet them to win the national championship game. Like, pile it on. They've made me plenty of money. And I love Alabama, but like, you could argue that you can't argue. It is a fact that Mac Jones is about to downgrade his wide receivers going from college to the NFL. He just had Waddle and Smith, 2 top 10 picks. Now you got N'Keal Harry and Nelson Aguilar. Who's the guy from San Francisco? Bourne. You're downgrading your wide receivers. You have almost a similar offensive line. It's going to be a different situation. But
again, you can't forget about Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, though.
A lot of help there.
In the middle of the field.
That's true. So hopefully it works out, as Patriots fans. I kind of, and apparently Bill Belichick was not enamored with Justin Fields at all or whatever. I would have liked Fields after that slide. I thought it would have been cool to move on from Brady with, like we just said, somebody that can move around, somebody that can move like Cam, but still has an arm left. And Fields could be that. Mac Jones is going to take this the right way. Mac Jones is going to be Tom Brady, but not actually as Tom Brady. He's just a lead legs Tom Brady type of prospect.
Great way to end this segment. Up next, we have Chelsa Messenger from Picks and Parlay, baby. She's coming on to the show, talking some MLB betting. We'll get to that next.
All right, we got the NFL draft talk out of the way. We are back on Unreasonable Odds. I'm Julian Edlow, my co-host Steve Buchanan, kind enough to actually join his own podcast this week. And we're bringing in a special guest for MLB as well, Chelsa Messenger, sports betting analyst at Picks and Parlays. Thank you for joining us on Unreasonable Odds.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I know everybody's probably inundated with NFL draft stuff right now, but baseball's still going on and there's still plenty of ways to win money. And of course, that is why we are all here.
Baseball is going on. And like we kind of talked about for a minute before the show is going on, when you were like, I hope we're not doing any NBA, because right now the NBA is impossible to come on a podcast as we're doing at noon Eastern right now and give plays for 7, 8, 9 p.m. on that day. So we're sticking to our strengths here in MLB. I say R as a collective unit, not me. But we will get to that in a second. First, we're going to play a segment called Know You Better that we've played the last few weeks with our guests. Steve, of course, hasn't been here, so if he wants to chime in on some of these answers, he can, and I'll probably keep bragging about some of my bigger wins as well. But Chelsa, you're our guest, so we're starting with you here. This doesn't need to be a dollar amount or anything, just like your biggest win, whether that means, your biggest money win, your biggest plus odds win, your most memorable win, whatever comes to mind for you.
Just a couple weeks ago, I had a baseball parlay that I think was plus 893 that I won. So that was nice. Can't really think about, when you bet on so many games, it's hard to narrow it down to just a few, because when you bet every day, it's just like a whirlwind. But that's the one that sticks out to me in the past week or two, because it is hard to get some of these baseball games right, because I think last night underdogs might have gone 8-2. So it is hard to predict games, and I would never, suggest doing parlays as a main source of income for betting on any sport, especially baseball, but they are fun to do.
And real quick too, underdogs, like you mentioned, have been so profitable this season, like at an insane rate so far too. Like one of my favorite teams, which is the Seattle Mariners, which I've been saying since February, I actually like them to win the AL West. So I've been the conductor of that train, but they've been extremely profitable this season. Like that's one team too. And then just some of these underdogs, like there was a couple of days ago, I had a small parlay on the Mariners and the Padres when they faced off against Clayton Kershaw, like just grabbing some of those matchups where, some of those teams have the advantage, even if they're underdogs, has been extremely, extremely profitable. So I'm with you, like at least in the early going in April, where we've seen a lot of offenses kind of slumping so far, that's definitely been something to take advantage of.
Yeah, or anyone against Jacob deGrom, bless his heart.
It's true. Steve, would you like to gloat in your biggest win before we move on?
Well, my biggest win will be when the Mariners win the AL West. So let me just say that one, because at 33-1, that's going to be a massive haul when they do end up winning that.
All right. Well, this is the part where I weekly tell everyone how I had Steve Pearce at plus 3,000 to win the 2018 World Series MVP. But I do have the Mariners plus 4,000 to win the division. So I guess I'm with Steve. If that winds up happening, I will switch my answer from Steve Pearce. All right, Chelsa, your worst bad beat. There's a lot of things.
Oh, yes. And there's a reason I'm not doing strikeout props anymore, because I have lost so many strikeout props by the hook, by one strike, by one bad call, by an umpire. My goodness, I cannot wait till they have automated strike zones. So I think that's probably my worst beats of this season have been strikeout props that you lose by the hook when they have 2 strikes on a batter and then the ump misses a strike call. Those are just god awful to watch. I think if you do strikeout props, don't watch the game.
I was going to say, I honestly assumed that you had been doing really well in strikeout props, because I see you from time to time pop up giving some analysis on why a pitcher is going to go over 6.5, 7.5 strikeouts, whatever. And I'm sitting there nodding like, yeah, that all makes sense to me. So you fooled me. I didn't know they weren't going well for you this season.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that my bad beats this year have been on strikeout props.
Those are your worst ones. Missing.
Right.
Okay, got you. I mean, I trust you there. It seems like you know what you're doing there. Steve has no idea what he's doing with strikeout props. He fed me a couple on opening day that lost. Any bad beats you'd like? Yeah, you did. I bet
it's going to happen. I mean, you are going to lose sometime. I think people have that misconception that no matter what the play is or what somebody gives are automatic wins. You are going to lose sometime in betting. So make sure everybody realizes that. I'll tell you what's been a bad beat for me this year. The stupid non-DH rule in the National League needs to go away again. There is nothing more frustrating than having the over in a game or the over on a team total, bases are loaded, and then you got the dope starting pitcher coming up batting ninth, and he grounds into a double play or something like that, killing all hopes that you're going to hit the over on that total. So we need to get rid of the National DH. It just needs to go away. I'm sorry. The National League needs to get rid of the non-DH rule. We need a universal DH, and then those bad beats won't come as often anymore.
Host a gambling podcast. You're here telling me some bets lose. Thanks.
Great insight there. But it is true. Right. I feel like every time I take a bet, like if I'll watch like a nationally syndicated show and I take one of their plays because it sounds so good and the numbers all add up and then you don't lose. And if you're not watching the game, like their analysis could have gone, straight to script, but a play can still lose. So I think that's, just part of being a bettor.
All right. This transitions us into the worst advice you've ever given.
Ooh.
Putting you on the spot to throw yourself right under the bus.
Who, me? Am I going first?
Both of you guys. I'm definitely making Steve answer this one.
Steve, you can go first because I've got to think. Because, there's been some bad plays that I've given out, but the numbers have added up. They just didn't, pan out.
I think sometimes I definitely try to get a little cute with some of my analysis. Like the kind of way to think of it, if you're on the fence about something, like I feel like you might just be best off just like, just kind of keep it to yourself or just making it not a play. Like if you're kind of going with your gut at the end of the day, if that's what's kind of being the deciding factor for you, especially when you're giving out plays, I think that's one where I need to stay away more from, because if the numbers are telling me one thing, but I'm kind of feeling like, well, maybe this could go in the other direction. I think that's kind of where where some of those plays don't end up going the way you want them to.
Yeah. I will say that I think taking strikeout props this year, I don't think I'm giving any more of those out because as I've referenced before, there's so many things that can affect those other than just a pitcher being lights out because as we saw in the last one, Jacob deGrom lights out again, but he didn't get a strikeout prop. And it could be, a matter of somebody getting a ground ball instead of a strikeout, an umpire missing a call, the Mets yanking, deGrom earlier in the game as they did, I think maybe in the first start. So I think your analysis can be spot on for some of those strikeout props. And plus I've noticed that some of the numbers I think have been so much higher this season. I think that the books have noticed that people like taking the overs on that. And so you'll see these numbers that are not easy to bet. So I think I am staying away from those, which normally I think pitching is my strong point. Obviously my husband was a pitcher, so I feel like I have an inside edge, but the numbers for strikeout props this season have been really hard to bet.
I'm glad you brought up your husband because I have to tell you a quick story. So while looking at your Twitter profile, I realized that you are married to Jake Buchanan, who's been a pitcher in the major leagues. That is also my son's name. My son's name is Jake Buchanan. So I thought that was a fun little tidbit that I came across.
It's a good name. He doesn't play basketball, does he? Because I think I had a Google search, it notifies you every time a new article comes out back when he was playing. And there was some high school basketball player named Jake Buchanan that was just dropping dimes every night. I was like, wow, I need to find this Jake Buchanan. He's scoring like 33 a night. So that's not your son, is it?
No, at 9 years old, he's not dropping dimes just yet.
Gotcha.
All right. We have family connections or whatever we want to call it going on. A new addition to Know You Better. All right. Team or player that you've lost the most on. And we can just parlay these two together. You can also give it with team or player that you've won the most on.
I think the Phillies have done me wrong many a time this year. Every time I think their lineup is going to be good, they end up scoring no runs or just a couple. So I think the Phillies are the team that I trust the least this season. On paper, they look good. They have some good starting pitchers, but for some reason or other, I cannot seem to get their games right. So they are a complete stay away from me.
100% Oakland Athletics for me. I have taken the over on their team total so many times this season, and it's never where I think I'm like 0-7 on taking the over on their team total, which also brings me to tonight, because the one pitcher that I've never said that I'm going to back again, I'm actually backing tonight, which is Robbie Ray going against the Atlanta Braves. I don't know how I've gotten here again, but at least, and this is where that analysis come in. At least as of right now, the Braves statistically have been one of the worst offenses in the league, aside from the Detroit Tigers. Like, their numbers are absolutely putrid against lefties. They've been fine against righties, but lefties, it's like a complete opposite. So like, if you start diving into those numbers, like, they are literally second to last in the league in almost everything, like WOBA, WRC plus. They're one of the highest in strikeout percentage. Robbie Ray's been pretty decent so far, which is not a high bar that he has to go over to begin with, but he's got good strikeout upside. He seemed to be pitching better in Toronto, which is also Florida, quote unquote, because that's where they're playing. But at least as of tonight, I'm backing Robbie Ray. I hate it, because this is somebody that, like, I written off years ago, and I said I'd never do it again. But at least from what the numbers say tonight, like, it's because when I last checked, the Blue Jays were even money on the DraftKings sportsbook, so you're getting even money on that on the money line. But I'm probably gonna hate him again tonight. I'm fully preparing to be angry at Robbie Ray again tonight.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because that was one of the games that, you know, on paper, I was like, oh, this is a good spot for Braves team total. And it sucks when you spend 20 minutes handicapping a game only to find that glaring error in your logic. And it is the Braves, second to last versus lefties when it comes to most statistical categories. Granted, they have not faced a whole lot of lefties. So maybe you could say that the sample size is small. And also, they've been a lot hotter as of late, because to start the season, nobody in the Braves lineup outside of Acuna was hot. So I think they are starting to come on a little bit stronger, but this is one I'll be staying away from just because you mentioned. I think it's one that Robbie Ray is either going to walk 6 guys, have 9 strikeouts, and give up 5 home runs, or he's going to strike out 9, you know, and go 6 scoreless like he did last time. So Robbie Ray is one of those pitchers that I think you just stay away from, just because you don't know what you're going to get. He is the definition of volatility in the market. I will say Acuna has 2 home runs off him in 3 at bats. So maybe looking at Acuna there, if you like home run props, if you're feeling a little risky. But yeah, that's a stay away game for me, I think.
And I think it's so important too, like, when you're looking at these April stats, that, like, these are so volatile, because, like, when they update overnight, I don't know if do you use fangraphs.com at all for baseball stats and all that?
Yeah, like the advanced ones.
Yes,
like the
correct.
FIP and all those fun ones.
Yep. So those obviously, you know, update overnight, and they move dramatically. Okay? Like, teams can go from being the bottom of the league to have one good night of offense, and all of a sudden they're near, you know, the middle of the top, because of that's just how new these numbers are, and it's fresh. But I still think that it's worth looking at some of these recent trends, because once you get, like, into July and August, you don't see a lot of movement in these numbers because the sample size is much bigger. But, like, for my case, at least from the small sample, the Braves have struggled really bad against lefties. So that could be something I could take advantage of tonight with Ray. But at the end of the day, once we get to, you know, September, I know for a fact that the Braves are not going to be near the bottom of the league against lefties. That's just how it started out for them. So I think it's, you know, it's definitely worth thinking about some of those trends, especially early on into the season, but it also could be an advantage if a team is struggling against that particular split. That's where some of that advantage can come from.
Yeah, real quick, what do you make of the Dodgers struggling against lefties? Because statistically, they haven't been good against lefties this season, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, that's another one too. And I think you look at some of the numbers here too, like Mookie Betts has gotten off to a really slow start. That's obviously something. They've had some injuries where they've had to use, like, Zach McKinstry in the lineup. And, you know, some of these guys that have filled in, Edwin Rios has been a guy that usually is on the bench. They've almost been forced to play him against lefties because they're down so many bodies. So again, that's just something that, like, once the season moves on, I have no doubt that they're going to be like that. But again, yeah, the lefties against the Dodgers has been a split to attack against in the early going because of injury so far.
Right.
I mean, you guys just completely hijacked the segment and just started going with MLB.
Sorry.
So, I mean,
Sorry,
that's
not
fine.
sorry.
That's fine. We're here to talk baseball. I'm here to steer the ship. So I love it. I could just sit here and do nothing. Well, before we close up with a few minutes of just actually getting into whatever baseball we want to talk about, trends that you guys love to follow or fade, and we'll keep it to MLB since we're obviously going all MLB heavy here.
I'm not a big trends person when it comes to baseball. I think some are worth noting, especially first five unders. There's been some teams that have been surprisingly hot to the first five under that you kind of wouldn't expect because obviously the Brewers are a team you probably would expect, and they've been hot in the first five under just because they have that pedestrian offense and also good starting pitching. But the Padres have been one of those teams that have been hot first five under team, and you think with so many big names in that lineup that they would not be not scoring that many runs. But for some reason or another, they've struggled to score runs kind of in the first few frames of the game. Maybe that changes, because obviously they've piloted on the Diamondbacks the other day. But that's the only trend that I would look at. But I think you don't ever base your bet on one trend alone.
I completely agree with that too. And, I like to look at the over-under trends because I love betting the over-under, especially if you have like two poor pitchers going at each other or a team that has a really bad bullpen, which would be like the Detroit Tigers. Like, for example, tonight, the Yankees have been one of the worst teams at hitting the over on the season. They're 8-17, which is truly amazing when you think about how good that offense is. But obviously their early season struggles has led them to being a consistent team that's hitting the under. But then you have a matchup like tonight where you're getting like Tariq Skubal going up against the Yankees. Skubal hasn't pitched much this year. He's a lefty. The Yankees have been doing good against lefties. And statistically, the Tigers have one of the worst bullpens in the league. So even though the Yankees are 8-17 at hitting the over so far this season, this is a game where I want to target that over because I do feel like even though it's Garrett Cole who's going for them, they still can hit the over because they should just be able to tee off on just bad pitching innings 1 through 9. So I love looking at those over-under trends because that's where I like taking a lot of my bets on the over-unders and team total. So I do think that's something worth watching. Like you said, not one trend should make you love or hate a bet. It should be part of your research, but that's where I'm always at with MLB bets.
All right. I'm looking at the MLB board. I have some questions. I have some plays that I might be interested in, but I've been so out of baseball with the NFL draft and NBA that I don't know if these are good bets or not. So I'm going to ask you guys about these two, and then you guys can just kind of go through what you see today, what you see for the weekend or whatever. I fade Madison Bumgarner on the first 5 every time. I don't look. I fade him. Last time I faded him on the first 5 in a 7-inning game, and he threw a no-hitter. I'll say for my own personal pride, it doesn't count as a no-hitter because it was 7 innings, so I didn't get no hit. But I was on the wrong side of that one. Pretty good. Is John Gray and the Rockies offense good enough on the road to even consider this one at around even money, or is the Mad Bum fade train just done?
I mean, obviously, he looked a lot better in his last one against a pretty good Braves lineup. I don't think that he's going to be winning the Cy Young this year. I think he still has some real big faults, in his pitching arsenal. But that one nothing stands out to me about that one. I will say the Diamondbacks offense has been a lot better than I thought it was going to be. This is a team that I didn't think that was going to do anything, but they've actually won some games. I think maybe 8 of their last 10. So just not anything stands out to me on that one. So can't give you any good advice. Sorry.
Madison
Bumgarner
also
just aren't a great team to bet on, but
no, I mean the Rockies are literally, that lineup is literally like a double-A lineup. Like it's bad. Like it's worse than bad. Like after they got rid of Nolan Arenado and traded him to the Cardinals, there's just no power in that lineup at all. And so you look at Madison Bumgarner, who is, a lefty, but there's just nothing redeeming about that Rockies lineup, even against lefties. So, I look at
have some good righties though.
They do have some decent righties, but like their power output for the season is just absolutely horrific. I haven't checked over the past couple of days, but they were under 100 against even lefties. Like it's been that bad. So I look at that, and even though the total's at over under at 8.5, John Gray's been good enough for the Rockies that if I was to make a play on that, I'd probably take the under 8.5 runs, just because Diamondbacks offense has been overly great. John Gray has by far been their best pitcher, especially on the road. And that Rockies offense just has not done anything really offensively all season long. So, not really a fade towards Bumgarner, but probably a fade on the over for the game total.
All right. I'm not betting that.
I would not. I advise you not.
Your worst advice segment. You said don't bet stuff when we're not betting that.
See, there you go.
All right. So Steve and I are both based out of Boston. I think we're both far from Red Sox homers. I will mostly knock what the Red Sox have done over the last couple of seasons. However, Eovaldi's been pretty good when he has his stuff. From what I know, Texas, that lineup is not good. And you guys are going to have to introduce me, if you can, to whoever is starting for the Texas Rangers. I'm about to look up his stats. I have no idea who that is, but I'm looking to maybe lay the half run on the first 5 with the Red Sox on the road. Yay or nay?
I think I'd rather just, what are the odds of them just to win outright?
I think they're about minus 150-ish on the money line.
155. Yeah, it's pretty juiced up.
Dang. Because I would say just take the Red Sox, I would like that play better than maybe a first 5, just because you need, for first 5 bets, you need the other, you need the Red Sox to score some runs too. It's not just pitching. You need the offense to do something too. And we've seen some low scoring games from the Red Sox as of late, that Mets series, most notably. And I just don't know that much enough about our Arihara. I always want to say Koji. Who was the Red Sox guy that was like 40?
That was
Koji Uehara.
Yeah, that's who.
On that 2000, what was that? 13 World Series?
Yeah.
I always think of that guy when I see this guy's name. But that is neither here nor there. Yeah, I'm not a huge first 5 unless I really, really love the pitching matchup. And like I said, I just think you need the bats to contribute too, which the Red Sox bats have been hot. So, I mean, I wouldn't talk you off of it.
Yeah, I'm not crazy about the first 5 in this one, just because you're getting such a mixed bag from both starting pitchers. Eovaldi has been either one realm or the other, and then, Hari, if that's what his name is, I still don't know enough about him because he's still new to the major league. So he's not somebody that I'm like consistently looking to go after. And then, like we mentioned too, the Red Sox bats definitely cooled off in that Mets series. I think they only scored 2 runs total in those 3 games. Obviously, one of them was against Jacob deGrom, where they did win 1-0. But the offense has just not been there, even like since back to the Mariners series. Because of course the Mariners are superior in the AL West, but they've really kind of cooled off in that one too. So it's been a tough sledding for that offense as of late. The Rangers are not a team that you fear offensively. But I'm not sold that Eovaldi is blowing away hitters like, a lot of the Red Sox fans have expected him to this year. So that's probably one I would stay away from. I'm not crazy about that game at all.
We're just dumping on your picks.
Yeah,
pick
some good games.
I haven't looked at a baseball board in a little while, and I'm here to just throw them out. I will say I'm very well known for giving out the best MLB analytics out there. That's a joke.
Question.
The Red Sox rank. The Red Sox are 3rd in baseball in runs per game in the first 5 at 2.96 per game. They score they score early. They get the majority of their runs early. 7th in runs per game overall. I don't know if you put any weight in that early. It's kind of early in the season. It's kind of a weird number, but Texas league average, I thought they would be lower. Right at 15.
With that number, and this is going back to just like looking at April stats, that is very top heavy from the beginning of the season.
Right. They were beating up on teams.
Right. Because like for a while back, the Reds were averaging almost 9 runs per game, like through the first 2 weeks of the season. Obviously that was unsustainable, and that's dropped dramatically since then. But that is very top heavy because that is not the team over the past week and a half.
It's here's how you can tell that it's still too early to maybe put weight in numbers like that. You just mentioned Cincinnati. Their first 5 runs per game, they're averaging 4.83 runs per first 5 innings at home, 1.58 on the road.
Wow. That's a major difference. Yep.
That's probably one of the larger splits that you will see in baseball right now.
Even though Cincinnati is a very hitter-friendly park, I know everybody talks about Coors Field, and obviously number 1 for a reason, but, the Great American Ballpark is not an easy park to pitch in.
No, definitely not.
All right, I'm just going to hand the floor over to you guys at this point. Like, is there anything – I mean, I just gave 2 plays that you don't like. So is there anything that either of you do like on Friday, or matchups that you want to look forward to, look ahead to on the weekend?
Yeah, how about we give plays and we can tell each other why it's wrong?
I'm all for that.
You guys will both sound right to me.
We're going to lay it all on the line, and then everybody can tell me why I'm wrong. I'm taking the under in the Royals Twins game. I like what I've seen from Brady Singer so far. The most impressive thing for me about him is only allowed 2 home runs in 21 innings of work, and going against this Twins lineup that, of course, is red hot, coming off that 6 home run game. But overall, this has not been a Twins lineup that has scored a whole lot. They've lost 8 of their last 10, scoring 3 runs or fewer in 7 of those last 10. And then we've got the Royals 1-9 to the under on the road. Twins 3-6-1 to the under at home. Twins are just 3-7 at home. So if you would like to sprinkle a little bit on the Royals, I think this is going to be a closer game here. I think the under is the safe play, under 8. Pineda has been good and all, but I think one of his starts, he has a 2.32 ERA and a whip under 1, which means he's not allowing a whole lot of base runners, which is a good thing in many categories. Royals not a team that's heavy on power either, 26th in home runs. I like this matchup to go under, and maybe worth a look to sprinkle a little bit on the Royals as an underdog here. And so go ahead and tell me all the things that are wrong with this one.
No, I like this one, and I'm glad you mentioned them as the underdog, because they've been a profitable team as the underdog. You're 6-5 on the money line as underdogs this season. You're getting them at plus 120 tonight, and quite frankly, the Twins offense has been anything but what anybody expected. I think everybody kind of has in their head that this was the offense that we saw back in 2019, where they were tearing the cover off the ball no matter who they face. This has not been that team so far this season. They're not getting any production from guys like Mitch Garver, Miguel Sano, who were some of the bigger bats for them back a couple of years ago. They've been slumping this entire season, and Brady Singer has been probably one of the more underrated pitchers, at least through the early months, month of April so far for the Royals. And it's a big reason why they have one of the best records in all of Major League right now. It's been truly amazing how well they've come out firing out of the gate. So I don't hate that play at all, but I will give a play that I know you're going to hate. And that's awesome. The under, because it's gone up now. It's now under 10.5 for the Braves Blue Jays game. Like, I am going to beat on this Robbie Ray drum until
you're taking a side and a total.
Yeah. So I'm looking. There's a lot to like in this game, at least I think as of right now. Like, I'm about to go on MLB Network in 15 minutes and talk about how I like Robbie Ray. This is a national thing that's going to be out in the world in a few minutes. But I mean, this total is going up.
This line is really going to move after your big media appearance, huh?
But this line is going up. It was 10 runs this morning. It's up to 10.5 now. I just think people are overvaluing how good this Braves team has been. They've been great offensively. But if the numbers against lefties at least stay true for one night, I just need to stay true for one more night, then the under is the play here in this one. So I think under 10.5 is the play right now. And that is the side where the money is going right now. It's at minus 115, where the over is now 105. So just, something to consider.
Yeah, the Blue Jays bullpen's been good too, at least statistically. Like, I know they faced the Yankees a lot, which kind of has boosted their stats. But I think they had the best ERA in baseball for a bullpen, I think a couple days ago, the last time I checked. So definitely worth a look, and definitely a contrarian play, because when you look at the starting pitchers, you never would think, under, but 10.5, that's the thing. You're playing the number. You're not playing, your initial thoughts. You're playing the number, and you do get a nice big number here.
Thanks for bumping your MLB Network segment there. Everybody's really excited for it.
They are.
All right. We're going to, unless anybody has any hot take minus the analysis, any other play that they want to give out before we wrap for Friday or the weekend.
I gave the play that I'm not confident about, so I'm good.
All right. Perfect. I have nothing. Watch for my day 2 NFL draft best bets. That'll be much better than my MLB analysis. He's Steve Buchanan. I'm Julian Edlow. She is our guest, a sports betting analyst at Picks and Parlays. Chelsa Messner, thank you so much for joining the Unreasonable Odds podcast and for helping us out on MLB, because obviously I'm just dead weight here.
Thanks for having me.